when I had conversation with nutritionists and we start talking about the diet composition and we need to make sure that the MDF is right. And that, I agree 100% that that's critical component, diet composition. But it's that diet that we spend so much time, like perfecting it, doesn't get to the cow, it's meaningless, right? And who is going to get that diet to the cow? The people. Who's going to, weigh, who's going to mix it, who's going to deliver that diet is our people. So we got to make sure that they are well trained.
A well-trained team is key to keeping everything running smoothly, from herd health to reproduction and feeding. And with the support of technology like SmaxTech's bolus system and AI-driven insights, employees can make faster, smarter decisions for better herd management. All right, welcome everybody to this episode of the Dairy Podcast Show. I'm your host for today, Gail Carpenter. I'm joined by Dr. Adrian Barragan from Penn State University. I think this is our third time recording together, so you are officially my most interviewed podcast guest.
Gail, winner, thanks.
And it's always great to chat with you. So I was really excited to see that we had a chance to talk again. And we were talking before I started recording. I was trying to think of new things to talk about because we've talked about inflammation, we've talked about metritis, and I was like, I'm going to have to come up with like a different topic. And I've been spending a lot of time recently thinking about personnel training. And so I was getting excited to pick your brain about that. And then I saw in the questionnaire that that's what you had wanted to talk about too. So that's how you know we've been interviewing too much, is we're starting to think alike. So.
Right, exactly. And it's I was in the same page, Gail, about like, okay, what is something new and exciting? Because inflammation, I mean, always is good stuff coming out from inflammation, but I think that people are getting a little tired of hearing me about talking the same thing over and over. So
yeah, well, we should probably introduce you. So I feel like we know each other pretty well at this point, but not everybody maybe has listened to all of our interviews. So you're an associate professor and extension veterinarian at Penn State. But do you want to just give a brief little bit about your background and how you got where you are?
Yeah, definitely, Gail. So, thanks again for the invitation. It's always a pleasure and so fun to be here and to get to interact with you, Gail, and just with the audience. It's a great program. A little about myself. My name is Adrian Barragan. I am originally from Argentina, so that is where the strong accent came from. Although I have been working for many, many years and trying to get rid of that, it's not going to happen.
It works for you. Don't try to get rid of it. Yeah.
All right. Glad to hear that. But anyhow, Spanish is my native language, and that is sort of the main link to this area of personal training, personal management, human resources, so a little bit of what we're going to be talking about today. But a little background of my career, I graduated at veterinary school in the University of La Plata back in 2010. I practiced as a private veterinarian in some large feedlots in the area close to Buenos Aires province. Buenos Aires City as well. And then in 2012, the opportunity to get out of the country came out, and that was something that I always wanted to do, just get out for a couple months and just, get to see new stuff and management, stuff like that. So I came out with the plans to get back to my country in 6 months after that, 12 years ago. After, you can see now where I am. So the plans didn't go as expected, as is usually sort of what happened. But anyhow, career and personal, so I met my wife and life just took two different routes. So I ended up doing a master and a PhD at the Ohio State University. You always hear me talking about that. Under Dr. Gustavo Schunemann advising. So Gustavo was my advisor for the master. And then for the PhD, I had Dr. Santiago Vaz. And then it has been already 7 years and a half since I've been in this position at Penn State. As you say, I'm an extension veterinarian, and that's basically what it is sort of like an expert consultant for private veterinarians and also for producers or nutritionists or anybody on sort of the animal health related field. And my main sort of duties as extension veterinarians, I do a lot of consultations, what we call field investigations, where we help troubleshoot animal health related issues And with that, it comes a huge component of personal training, with the part of like we need to develop these protocols, develop these practices targeted to prevent the disease, but we have to train the people, our people, to do the right thing, to do it right. And as many of you in the dairy industry know, about 53% or so of our workforce, they are Spanish-speaking workers, right? And not many of those speak English fairly well. So being bilingual, Spanish-English, is definitely a great skill to have in this field. And I have leveraged that skill, and I have that's how all this area of research and extension work has built through my career years.
Maximize profitability and herd health with early detection in animal health, reproduction, and feeding. The most advanced bolus technology and professional support from agricultural experts make this possible with SmaxTech, the health management system that future-proofs your dairy operation.
No, I've been thinking a lot about this recently. I think about this. I'm in education and extension, so I think the longer you're involved in research or with education, either through teaching or through extension or whatever, you start to realize that like the people are so important, because you can memorize the textbook, you can know exactly what the textbook says should happen, but if you can't get the people side of it to work, then it doesn't matter, right? Everything that you've learned, everything that you know doesn't matter. The cows can't read your mind, right? The cows won't do things because they're supposed to do them. They do things because of the people that are doing the actual hands-on management stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think so much in animal science and dairy science, we spend a lot of time thinking about like the facts, the biology. We really want to understand the biology and the science. But the science doesn't work unless you have the people side of it too, right?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I see this as sort of like when I had conversation with nutritionists and we start talking about the diet composition, and we need to make sure that the MDF is right, and I agree 100% that that's critical component, diet composition. But it's that diet that we spend so much time, like perfecting it, doesn't get to the cow, is meaningless, right? And who is gonna get that diet to the cow? The people. Who's gonna weigh, who's gonna mix it, who's gonna deliver that diet is our people. So we gotta make sure that they are well trained.
Yep.
And when we think about training, one thing that is really common in our field, Gail, is that we train people on the job, right? And that is okay. I don't say that has to be removed, but the main challenge with training people on the job is that they get to know how to do things, but they don't know why they do it. And that is a key part that we have to educate our people, not only to make sure that they do the right thing, but also to help troubleshoot when something goes wrong, or to avoid drifting when something gets easier one way. It should be okay. No, it should not be okay, because this is the consequence of doing it wrong, right? But if they don't know what is the consequence, well, let's just try it. Most likely it's going to be fine, right?
Yeah, that's so true. If you don't understand the why behind why you're doing things, it's really easy. I think drift is really important to mention there too, procedural drift, because if you don't understand why you've been trained to do things a certain way, you're like, yeah, you know what, I can do this more efficiently. I can cut X step or Y step. If you don't understand why each of those steps is there the way it's supposed to be had, then it's really easy to start. And I'm not saying cutting corners like people are trying to be lazy, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done at the dairy, and people want to be efficient and get the job done. And there are some things that sometimes, I don't know, we both work at universities, so we both have to do parts of our jobs where you're like, what, this doesn't make sense, right? Like all of the steps we have to do for all of and it would just make our job so much easier if I didn't have to do all of this training in this form and XYZ. And if I think somebody who's doing hands-on work, it's the same thing, right? If they're like, well, why am I think of an example I heard recently, a milker that not understanding to wipe the teats, right? And because she was short and she couldn't reach, right? And so a lot of cows were getting missed because like the 2-year-olds with the really high udders, if you can't reach them, then you can reach to dip, but you can't necessarily reach to wipe them off, right? And if you don't understand why that's important, and you're trying to, we give them a bunch of benchmarks about how quickly we want them to work, how much turnover we have in the parlor, when we need to get this shift done by, And if you're internalizing all of that, but not why each of these steps need to be done in the way it's done, then I don't blame you for skipping things. Yeah.
Exactly. No, and I agree. That's what I will say. I was doing some training and some consulting last week, and it's like one thing that I was pointing out is it's not that people don't do the right job or they shop right because they don't want it or because they want to be lazy. And most of the time, at least in my 12 years or so of experience training personnel in the States, is that they just either don't understood or they don't have the proper training.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to this training, one of the most popular ones that we do is the Calvin Assistant, and one a really sensitive topic that I always talked about is utilizing the Calf Shack, how to utilize that tool in the proper way, because it's a very delicate, I don't know if delicate is a word, but it's a really strong tool. And I always encourage that to use as a last resort. And I have walked into farms that I had to stop those guys because there are some animal welfare concerns there. I say, wait a minute. And I know it's not their fault, but, let's stop it now. And, we'll try something else, and then we'll talk over about this and how to use and things like that. And again, it's not, you cannot get mad at them because they are just trying to do their job, and time is of the essence in the industry. That's usually one really lacking resource that we have. We don't have enough time. Like 24/7 is just not enough for us.
Yeah.
So I think I agree with you, Gil. It's just trying to keep up with the work and being efficient. Sometimes, if we don't know the whys, it lead us to procedural drift, as you said.
Mm-hmm. I heard a statistic last week that what was it? It costs 150% of a person's salary with every turnover you have. Is that something like that, right? Like, it costs more to hire and train a new person than to retain somebody who could do a good job, and just hasn't necessarily gotten the best training or the most complete training. Replacing that person is not easy and not cheap.
Well, and yeah, that's a study. It's getting old now, but it's still so relevant. I think it was 2013 or so. Study published that they estimate sort of what will be the cost of rehiring entry level and also a manager sort of type. The manager was 150. And the entry level was about 100 or so of their salary, annual salary, right? Just to rehire. And those are those invisible costs that we usually don't see on daily basis, but at the long run, and those costs are related to the time you spend searching for the candidate, the time you spend actually interviewing the candidate, the time you spend all the paperwork related to hiring that person, but also that learning curve. That learning curve have been estimated by some studies to be around 14 days when somebody has some background.
Yeah.
Now, when you have somebody is fresh, that's probably about a month that you're just going to be losing money because of poor personal performance until that person gets, And I always say, even with the most experienced milker or maternity area guy or whoever is the people who are hiring, they might be super experienced and they might be super knowledgeable about working on another farm that they never have worked on. Mm-hmm. So, we all work with the cows, but we don't work the same way.
Right.
I have seen hundreds of cows, and I can assure you, not even one farm had the same management. All of those farms, they had some slight difference here and there, and that is where it takes time for them to get used to learn and to become efficient and have a good performance on it. And that's where you see all those losses, invisible at first, but they definitely are there. And the importance on training on that is key, I think. Not only to avoid that cost, but also to retain, as you say, Gail, to retain the people. Sometimes, you say, sometimes I have these trainings where I go to a farm and I have employees that never have worked with cows before, right? And I always say I like that population of workers because they are fresh. They don't have any unconscious bias, any bad habit there. Their brains are fresh. They never have worked with cows, so now we can put the good stuff there, right? And it takes a little bit, perhaps longer, for them to get really up to speed compared to somebody that already worked with cows. But when you get there, man, that those people are the ones that do exactly what you want them to do because they never had done it before, and the only way they learn it is how you told them, right?
Walk me through this a little bit. So we understand, I think we've established that it's important for people to understand why they're doing what they're doing. You talked about, you're dealing with people at all different levels of understanding and experience. Sometimes, like you said, and I've seen this with students too, that it sometimes makes it a little bit harder if you have to have like habits to break or misconceptions to break. But still, at least if somebody comes from a farm background, they hopefully have like at least a common understanding of the language that we're using and the terms that we're using. And when we're talking about immigrant labor, we might even be talking about differences in literacy, even, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And written communication might not necessarily be the most effective form of communication. So as you're developing some of these trainings, what are you thinking about when you're trying to okay, you don't want to like throw them right into the deep end and all of the in-depth physiology and everything, but you also don't want to talk down to them, right? So how do you find that good middle ground?
I mean, that's a great point. And I mean, the knowledge that they had to get is essentially the same, but as you say, it's how you deliver, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one thing, I mean, we actually done a few studies with Gustavo when I was doing my master, and even Gustavo published one before about sort of comparing having an oral presentation and hands-on demonstration, and sort of our outcome variable was gain in knowledge. So how much they knew before, how much they knew after. Very simple design, and actually very open-eyed sort of type of study, super easy to understand as well. But we found definitely a great, I think it was a 23-25% increase in knowledge when we use this combination of having the oral presentation and the hands-on. And the oral presentation, as you said, Gail, it cannot be, it has to be really visual.
Yeah.
Videos, pictures, has to be, even the people that has quite some literacy and well educated, that population usually is not in a classroom taking classes for 8 hours. They have a minimum exposure to an actual formal lecture, if you might say. And if you ask me, when I finished vet school and I started working with cattle, 12, 14 hours a day, yeah, man, I will go back to college to do a seminar or something. And after an hour, my brain was tired because it's just like, this is getting used to, right?
Yep.
So I totally get it. So a few things on that. The oral presentation has to be very visual. So we have a lot of videos, we have a lot of pictures, short and concise messages. We had to get away from those long like paragraph of information there. They're not going to read it. Probably, you just talk it over, right? The other important component, they had to be brief. We try to keep it 30 to 45 minutes, and it's better to do 2 sessions shorter than 1 session longer, right? And with that comes the combination of the hands-on. So whatever you taught them in this oral presentation, and we make it really visual and brief and sweet and with clear messages, then we're going to actually do it. So now the hands-on is going to be, let's go and do it. So we go with milk cows, we assist, we do a demonstration of a calving assistant. So they get to do everything they see. So now everything just sticks there because you not only learned about it in a presentation, but now you're doing it. So now that combination is really fixing in your brain and helping you retain that information.
Yeah, I think those are also really good lessons if you're teaching, right? And if you're like, even with adult education, with non-Hispanic folks, I think those are all like, probably the classroom sit and listen to lectures for 8 hours is not an effective way for any of us to learn. And especially true if you're not somebody who's accustomed to sitting in the classroom for extended periods of time. Yeah.
A comment to add there, Gail, with a different literacy and even different language. One thing that people may feel they're probably most unaware is that it's not only Spanish the language that you will find out there, right? With the non-English speaking workers. Many of even the Central American, South America immigrants, they speak a dialect. That is I think it's about like 50 or 50 something different dialects that are out there. And when that came into place, sometimes these workers, the only language they speak is that dialect, and there's one person in the group that speaks Spanish and the dialect, so it's going to translate.
Yeah.
So when you have those situations, you got to make sure that person that is doing all the translation gets it really well, because otherwise it's going to be like a, I don't know how you call that game in English, but we have a game that's called the broken phone.
Telephone. Yeah.
Yep. You tell one kid one thing, tell to the next. By the time they get to the end of the line, it's a totally different message, right?
Yep.
So we gotta make sure that initial messenger gets it really right. So when that happens, I really spend a lot of time with them, and the ones that do not speak the Spanish, the visual is key. So all these videos that we have developed with the years, all these good pictures, good images that, you spend a lot of time gathering those years and years of, your libraries of picture and video, visual libraries. Mm-hmm. You build them, it takes time, but they're really beneficial, especially in those situations.
Yes. I want to kind of highlight some of what you were just talking about there with the dialects, and you might have a bunch of people who speak some of the same dialects on a farm. I was at a talk last week. You probably know who Jorge Delgado is with Alltech.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He was talking, I was listening to a talk he gave last week, and it was, he called it Comunidad. So it was about community and building community. And he went through and talked about all these different things with employee training and retention. Mm-hmm. And he emphasized how important it is that they feel plugged in to a community outside of the farm, right? Because you can only work so many hours a day.
Yeah.
Even everybody's got to sleep sometime. Everybody has to get off the farm sometime, and making sure that people feel connected to a community when they're not at work. He had forgetting the name of the speaker he had alongside him, but she does some community work with immigrant communities up in the Twin Cities area. And I've been spending a lot of time thinking about that since I saw that talk. Do you have examples of farms that you think are doing a really good job of that?
I mean, that's a great topic, and we're actually addressing that at the university level here. I'll tell you in a little bit, but one hypothesis I have, and I just gotta find a way to test it, is that when it comes to populations with low, with a small immigrant community, especially with the immigrant workforce, the turnovers they're higher because they don't have that geographical ties to the community. And I agree 100% with Jorge there, because that is key. And that is not having that community is one of the main reasons of social isolation of this population of workers. One thing we're doing in the college, we developed this course. It's called Community Engage with Immigrant Workers. And what we do in this class, we go to the farm once. It's a full class, a 3-grade full class, in the College of Agricultural Science here at Penn State. So we take the students once a week to 2 farms now. That is, as we get more resources, we're going to expand it to help the workers speak better English. The key aspect of that, the key goal of that, is that they feel more comfortable to communicate outside of work in the community and start building those geographical ties to that community, right? Because here at State College, we have a really small Spanish or Latino community. If you go to Lancaster, Harrisburg, down southeast in Pennsylvania, we have a huge, Latino community. But in this area, and we still have a lot of large farms. Even actually, our largest farm is located here in Central County, in a largest state farm. So we still have a large their industry, but we don't have a large Latino community. So that's sort of the goal we're trying to do. So by helping them to communicate better, they will start building those connections, that community. And then that might help with 2 things. One, from the worker point of view, sort of helping with that social isolation, which is definitely a huge issue. Especially imagine, and I always put, when we talk to the to the kids, to the students. I started to feel old. I call them kids.
Same.
With the students, when I talk to them, so imagine that you go to a country where you do not speak the same language. You cannot understand anything that they tell you. And you're working 12 to 14 hours, 6 days a week, right? How long can you keep up with that?
Yeah.
It's a situation which is the social isolation is real, and especially when you have a poor work environment in place. And
yes.
I'm gonna tie that to your question about how the farm can do a better job there, especially for large farms. Our goal has to have the community there as well. Right. I was visiting some farms last week that they have, about 50 or so employees that are Latino. Man, we have a town right there. Right.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of people with the same backgrounds that is going to be, they spend 12, 14 hours a day together, 6 days a week. That's going to be your community, but you have to foster that community through a great work environment. If the work environment is neglected there, that community it's not gonna occur. It's gonna start breaking down. It's gonna have these clusters. And man, when you have those clusters, that is worse can happen, because then it's like a civil war. One cluster fighting with the other. So that is one thing that has to be avoided. And there are many things that can be done on those lines. The social events, barbecues, end of the year, Christmas parties. There are many of the farms that I worked with. They have like soccer tournaments. Any sport on those lines as well. Any social activity that can be added outside of work, or even sometimes I encourage the producer when they have the capability, right? Because the margins are tight. But if you have the capability to take 1 hour a week of work time, and instead of making them work, just put them together to do something fun, man, that's a huge positive effect on work environment.
Discover Schooler's flexible and reliable dairy feed ingredient solutions to help support your herd's growth and well-being. Schooler is a trusted partner in dairy feed solutions, delivering high-quality feed ingredients when and where you need them. Discover an extensive portfolio of product options to fit your unique rations and cost parameters. Learn more at schooler.com/dairy. That's SCOULAR.com/dairy.
We've done it again. We've already talked for like 25 minutes. So I feel like we could probably talk about this for a couple hours.
I agree.
But I want to kind of start talking about best practices. So what are some, you mentioned take an hour of the week and do something non-work related, something fun. What are some other best practices when it comes to training personnel, building that community? What are some best practices that you have for producers?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this study that we did last year. We are almost getting out for publishing it. But we interviewed 150 employees across 10 dairy farms in Pennsylvania. About 50 or so were English speaking, and the rest were 100 or so. They were Spanish speaking workers, and it was a human resources practices study. So it was a survey asking about what HR practices were they offer, what they would like, and stuff like that. But one question that really was shocking to see the results was like, what could your boss do better at job, right? And the Spanish-speaking workers, as I was expecting, they say communication. And I said, well, that makes sense, right? They don't speak the same language. They don't, they usually need a moderator or a translator to communicate. Perfect. Guess what the English-speaking workers said? Communication, exactly the same, right? And that to me was shocking to see, because I didn't think that was the area, but it makes sense. And my hypothesis in this area is that as veterinarians and producers, nutritionists, we went through this route because we want to work with animals. We want to work with cows. And, 20, 30 years ago, that makes sense when we have smaller farms, with 80, like sort of what we still have sort of around here in Pennsylvania. But now with these 900, 1,000, 11,000 cows farms, you don't manage cows anymore. You manage people, right?
Right.
And I don't think that that's still, I don't think that too many of our producers or managers, they like that part of, because again, we were in the business for something else, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing is that there is not much resources out there. One thing that was shocking this study to see is the ag laws regarding regulations of HR for workers and even worker management. They're really they're not as developed as other industry. So there's very lack of detail and a lot of like nothing there basically. So it's basically free will or whatever you feel is better. So there is a lack of guidance, and there's also a lack of educational material. So that's something that we're trying to work on, just to give those resources to people. But going back to how can the main question, how can you have one is one of the best practices, I will say communication and regular communication, right? Having these team meetings at least once a month. And of course, when it's something that is timely sensitive, of course, you got to meet at that time as well. But at least once a month, just to check out what's going on, what you need, everything is good. Okay, what happened? Every time when there's a meeting, is something wrong. What do you hear? Everybody is waiting to
an intervention.
hear.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it has a negative connotation because that has been the nature or the trend. But we had to remove that, and we had to put these positive meetings, right? We're meeting to, even this type of meeting, to do something social as well. They're very beneficial. Perhaps not every month, but do something social every 3 or 4 months, like a barbecue. Summer or the warm season is always a good time for that. But these communication meetings, they have to happen regularly, often, and with a more positive connotations, just to check out what's going on. You guys need something, right? And that really helped with that retention, the work environment, right? So when we think about the work environment, I think it's one of the most important factors to retain people. If we have a positive work environment, we're definitely gonna want to retain. And again, this, as you said, Gail, it costs a lot of money to lose people, and it costs even more when you lose one of those, 4 or 5 years. 4 or 5 years old, for saying one in the job old workers that they're so much invested there on knowledge and have those how to say institutional knowledge, sort of, right? Or for the dairy. So losing those one is even more detrimental, because they're taking all that knowledge from the operation, from the history of the operation as well, right? Especially new dairy farms that they're progressing and building, all that learning knowledge, like, oh yeah, we did this but it didn't work, so we switch it. It's gonna go with him. You cannot train somebody else on that, right?
Yeah.
So I always advise my producers and the people I work with, when you have the people like that, we gotta get the extra mile to retain, right? Because it's really really painful when we lose them.
I think a lot of times people hear communication and we need to get better at communication, and they up their game on the written communication, right? We're going to have all these written SOPs out, and people don't read very wordy SOPs. Like, that's just, people don't even read long emails, right? Like,
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I also like what you said about a positive work environment. I heard it's kind of buried in my head. I have not confirmed if this is was decided based on, accurate scientific investigation or whatever, but I heard a stat once and it's just buried in my head, that you need at least 5 positive interactions for every 1 negative interaction. And I think a lot of times people think like, oh, it's half and half. Like when I give negative feedback, I'm also giving positive feedback, but it's a 5-to-1 ratio, right? Think about how many positive interactions that means. But it goes a long way to building a positive work environment. Unfortunately, building community and building a good work environment isn't necessarily easy, right?
No, and it doesn't happen overnight, as you say, Gail. It takes years, and that's one thing that I think that it's worth the time to build the I don't want to say protocol, but to build your program, to have accurate, objectives, goals with events, right? So how often you're going to do it? What's going to be doing? What is going to be going on? Who is going to do it, right? So all those you need to spend. And again, time is up of the essence, and is always a lacking resource. But we need to try to find the time to put some brain power on that, right? How we're going to do it, how often, what's going to be, who's going to lead it, who's going to oversee, right? And also try to collect some feedback, right? I always say, like, when it comes to personal performance, a little more challenging, but with any sort of try or any type of change that we want to do in the farm, I always encourage the people that are doing the change to collect the data. Just get the data before and after, or even if you can do it at the same time, which personal training is a little more challenging on that. But just to collect the numbers and see if actually you're seeing that. For instance, with personal management, we'll look at turnover rate, right? And I know there's many other factors affecting that, even politics and other social or cultural difference are there. But still, it's better than nothing when we collect some data on something that we're doing, right? Because that's it's worth it. And even if it's not 100% accurate, it still will be enough to incentivize to keep moving forward that direction, right?
Absolutely.
One perhaps last comment on that. In this large study, we found a few things that were interesting, and an aspect of sort of the demographic of the population. 150 employees is fairly large population across 10 dairy farms. And one thing that we saw in this when we asked about demographic is that the Spanish-speaking workers, overall, the population was younger. And they also statistically younger and was statistically stay less time in the work. Compared to the English speaking. And again, that could be, the younger or the age might be related to some social differences or cultural difference from, when they're coming from their countries and whatnot. But then when you think about the turnover rate, I think it's due to that geographical connections that the English workers have. Right, because most of that's another thing that we ask. Most of the English workers, they were local. They had their family there. They had their wife. They had their mom, parents. Yep. They had their church. So everything was there. But for the Spanish workers, they didn't have anybody. Right? Maybe they have a relative working that farm, but when they live, they live together. Right? So that is something also that. Sometimes I have farmers that are doing a great job, and then all of a sudden they lose 3 or 4 employees, right? And man, that is really devastating because you are investing so much time. And I try to bring a little bit of this data into the picture. Say, hey, sometimes we can do the best from our side, but there are some demographics behind the population that is going to be there might be a tendency for them to move more often, right? Just because of how their I don't want to say the word, but their community or the demographics differ from other worker population. So, and that sometimes helps, but it's, as you say, it has to become part of a culture that we have to develop. It's a culture of improving our work environment, improving our personal management. And when we develop that culture and we have this program in place with defined goals and clear steps and, like people study how long it's going to take it, when it's going to happen, then it's just become natural. And now after that, it's already in our daily basis. Yep. And then after that, it will take a little bit to build it, but when it's built, it's gonna be incredible the benefits will bring.
One thing I want to add is that the right tools and resources make all the difference in running a farm. Training isn't just for employees, it's also about making the most of the technology that supports our work. That's why SmaxTech offers full onboarding and training sessions in both English and Spanish, making it easier for dairy teams to fully utilize advanced herd monitoring solutions. If you'd like to learn more, remember to visit SmaxTech's website.
It's time for our famous 3. Elevate animal performance with Berg & Schmidt Animal Nutrition, your trusted ally in excellence. Their high-quality feed ingredients like coated nutrients and fat powders provide ruminants with extra energy, boosting health, productivity, and cost efficiency. Unleash your herd's potential with Berg & Schmidt.
You have already answered our 3 questions at least once, because again, not everybody's heard you the first time. So what do you think makes a successful leader? We'll start with that one.
Yeah, let's start with that one. So I always say it's just that approach of thinking out of the box and defining the status quo. Just define that, right? So it's not accept. Oh no, because it was what we we have done for 50 years. We gotta keep doing it. Why, right? Let's start asking why it has been done. Is there any way to do it better, to do it more efficient, to do it with less resources? Even in a few farms that at least a couple of weeks ago, that was the thing. I found a few practices. Say, why are you guys doing this? Oh, when I got here, they were doing this. Okay,
Yeah.
That is not a good answer. We gotta think a little bit more about why it's happening, and is this the right way? Is there another way, right? When we think about innovation, that's how it happened, right? Quite often where we have practices, where we have tools that are helping us with a specific thing that we want to do, innovation happens when we start thinking out of the box about how can we get the same result with less of us, right? With less effort, with less resources, with less, more efficient, right? So I think that's still my answer for that is just thinking out of the box, is define the status quo.
I used to have a quote on, and I'm not sure who it's from, but I used to have a quote on my desk that said, "The most dangerous phrase in the language is we've always done it this way."
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes total sense.
And I know we're both academics, so I'm sure that we've heard that more than once.
I mean, when you think about how you do extension research,
Yep.
And that is one thing that I always put into some of the best studies that we have done that we put together were based on, we're doing this way. Okay, but what about if we do this way? Right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's test it. Let's do a trial, and then incredible trials come out, and really innovative practices or protocols, or I do a lot of treatment trials come along out of those conversations. Usually those conversations happen with the producers in the field, right?
Well, we're asking them a little bit out of order, so that's usually our third question, but I ask it first. So usually our first question is, what's your favorite dairy-related book or resource? But I'm going to switch it up on you, because we've been talking about working with Hispanic labor. What advice do you have for somebody who wants to get better at their Spanish?
Oh, good question. Yeah, good question. Getting better, unfortunately, it takes time, right? The best approach to get better is just keep trying, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you had the environment. So I always talk to some of either veterinarians or farmers or English speaking person and say that, oh yeah, I just want to get better at it. Say, hey, the guys are here. Just keep trying. Like when I came to the state, I have a really broken English, and I was ashamed to talk English until I realized, hey, if I don't talk, I'm not gonna learn, right?
Yep.
And so I just started talking, and it was really broken. I slowly got better, and then got studying, and we are at this level now. When I talk to English speaking people, and they told me about that they just feel shy. I say, whenever you try to communicate in the same language of the person that you're talking, at least from my point of view, I actually see that as that you're caring, that you're interested on learning my language to make my life better. So it's always come across like that. It's like you are nobody will make fun of a person that's just trying to learn your language. Actually, I will be happy to see that. Right?
Yeah.
And quite often that's, of course there are the outliers here and there, but that's quite often the situation. So, my advice would be try it as much as you can, no matter how broken it is, and try to find that time. Tablets these days, with the great Wi-Fi that we have everywhere these days, they're great because you can try it and something doesn't, they don't understand. You just type in the tablet, I have some forms that tablet is the main communication method to talk to the Spanish workers. And they have this big tablet there. And even they have in the parlor, and when the manager comes, they just bring the tablet with them, give it to the guy, and they just type it, and they just show it, and they just type it back and show it. Use those tools. There are other, we actually did a little testing on some audio aids. So you can say it's an app, and you can set the language that you receive and also the language that the other person will hear. So it translates automatically. And there were a few people in the parlor with the noise. It wasn't great, but if in the lunchroom actually were fairly good. So there are a few tools out there that you can use, but use that as an aid to keep you moving forward, right? Because at the end of the day, the message has to get across accurately, right?
Yeah.
But utilize those tools to get you, get to the final line, but use it as an aid to improve your language. So I think that will be, classes help. I'm going to say it does not help, but quite often those classes, they don't have the agricultural background.
Right.
And what you learn is really, it's not that useful on the daily basis when you're working with cows. And that happens a lot. I have a number of situations where I go to a farm and say, "Oh no, we have the translator that came to do the training," and then I start asking questions about the training, and they have no clue what they were doing, and say, "Well, what was the background of the translator?" "No, it was a lawyer."
Yeah.
So I never seen a cow before, right? So when it comes to those situations, they might be able to translate it, but the message is not going to get across accurately, right? So that is what I see with the classes. You can take classes; it might help you to improve some of the basics, but not as beneficial on the daily, task in the farm.
One of the speakers I was listening to suggested watching kids shows in Spanish. So I found out if you have Disney Plus, you can select different languages for cartoons, and so I was watching Bluey in Spanish.
That's one of my daughter's favorites cartoons as well. It does help, and actually my daughter were raising her as bilingual, so I only speak in Spanish to her, but every show that she watches, because she has so much English interaction from the family and the society here, so everything else is Spanish, and that's a great feature that you can utilize. So
is Bluey Spanish pretty accurate then, if I keep doing that? Okay.
yes, I'll say so.
Not a lot about cows in there, but
right. But you can make a cake, and I see those episodes that they're making food, and so regular daily basis stuff.
Yeah. So our third question, again, I'm ad-libbing these a little bit, but usually I ask, what's your favorite non-dairy related book or resource? I know you spend a fair amount of time on the road, so I'm going to ask you, what have you been listening to while you've been driving recently?
Yeah, well, this podcast is always my top, so I try to keep up because you guys are so busy. But no, I listen a lot to this podcast show now, and then I try to. I mean, there are so many, especially when it comes to the podcast and the audio, has been incredible success. I think that is one of the good things that COVID left that is this, right? The things that you can do on the road, so you can, get some more knowledge in this dead time that we used to have. Now we are learning, right?
Yeah.
So, I will say that this one, I also have been interviewed, or I have been in the dairy beef podcast show. I think it's a branch from this one as well. Because I work a little bit with beef cows as well. So I'm just always trying to get a little more knowledge on that as well, in areas that I'm not familiar with. So that is sort of the main area. And then I try to stay up with some of the other colleagues, the university webinars. There are a few in Cornell, Mitch in Wisconsin, that they always come in with good, really great speakers. So I always try to be on top of those. But so that will be the main ones that I've been listening lately.
Well, and I think we are at our time, so we probably should wrap it up. Great as always to chat with you, and thanks for those podcast recommendations. And if anybody wants to hear more from Adrian, check out the Dairycast to hear him hosting, and maybe a good chance to brush up on some Spanish too. Sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and as always, the LinkedIn page, if anybody's interested in connect, I'm on LinkedIn, Adrian Barragan, and so I try to keep that pre-update, especially with the extension, all the articles, the webinars that we keep coming, and of course the peer review articles as well. So if anybody is interested in connecting, please do through LinkedIn.
Very good. With that, thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Dairy Podcast Show.
Thanks again, Gail.